Walk into almost any language classroom in the world, and you will find a disproportionate amount of the syllabus completely consumed by one subject: grammar. The standard justification for this massive investment of time is straightforward. Educators argue that a rigid mastery of grammatical rules is an absolute prerequisite for successful communication. But a careful audit of standard instructional practices reveals a different reality. The dominance of grammar in our classrooms is actually driven heavily by systemic convenience and deeply ingrained psychological biases. To understand how this happens, we need to systematically unpack the 7 flawed rationales that teachers and institutions use to justify grammar-heavy instruction. Once we deconstruct these standard practices, we can replace them with 2 strictly empirical criteria that dictate when and why grammar should actually be taught. Treating grammar as a monolithic mountain that every student must climb is a pedagogical trap, one that often restricts fluency rather than building it. The first flawed justification is what we can call the Everest fallacy, or simply teaching grammar because it's there. Teachers often force students through complex grammar points for no other reason than the fact that the massive textbook includes them. An experiment exposes this bias. Grading the mistake we agreed to went by car, non-native teachers scored its severity at 4.6, while native speakers scored 2.2. For we didn't knew what happened, teachers hit 4.4, but native speakers dropped to 1.8, prioritizing intelligibility. The second flawed rationale is that grammar is tidy. Unlike vast, chaotic vocabulary, grammar can be broken into a structured grid. Educators present a limited series of items and tick them off one by one, creating a false illusion that learning language is simple. Which brings us to the third reason: it is testable. Accurately measuring a student's overall, practical linguistic progress is notoriously difficult and resource-intensive. As a result, schools rely on grammar tests as a logistical shortcut. This creates a washback effect. The logistical ease of administering grammar tests generates immense institutional pressure to design curriculums entirely around those exact tests. Institutions end up in a self-fulfilling cycle. They teach what is easily testable and test exactly what they have taught, completely bypassing the actual linguistic needs of the student. Beyond institutional ease, grammar also satisfies a deep psychological need. Reason 4 is the security blanket. For a learner overwhelmed by the convolutions of a foreign language, strict grammatical rules act as comforting beacons. While this illusion of control can build initial confidence, over-focusing on rigid rules degrades the student's ability to develop highly critical communication skills. Reason 5 compounds this issue through generational inertia. Today's teachers spent their own youth painstakingly mastering complex tenses. Having invested that effort, they naturally overvalue those mechanics in their own classrooms. Reason 6 is the whole system fallacy, a misconception that grammar operates like a deeply interdependent car engine, where removing a single gear causes total failure. In reality, grammar is an accumulation of distinct, detachable modules that educators should selectively teach based on available time. Finally, reason 7, power. In the dynamic environment of a classroom, grammar serves as a highly effective authoritative mechanism for the teacher. A student might naturally possess a superior accent or a massive vocabulary of modern idioms. But by relying on arcane terminology and complicated syntax rules, the teacher guarantees they remain the indisputable expert in the room. When we audit these 7 reasons, a clear pattern emerges. The persistence of heavy grammar instruction is deeply rooted in protecting the student's emotional comfort, preserving the teacher's professional ego, and maintaining institutional convenience. If systemic convenience and teacher authority are invalid metrics, what actually dictates when we should teach grammar? The research points to exactly 2 functional criteria. The first is comprehensibility. Specific structures like basic verb forms, interrogatives, and negatives carry the precise functional load required to transfer meaning. Without these specific tools, it is physically impossible to construct a comprehensible sentence. They must be taught. The second criterion is acceptability. This diagram outlines a harsh reality. Deviance from native speaker norms generates prejudice. A student needs correct grammar to navigate institutional barriers. Mere comprehensibility falls short for passing exams, securing employment, or integrating into society. We must equip them to pass these filters. Effective language pedagogy requires abandoning the monolithic grammar syllabus. Instead of teaching grammar because it is there, we must selectively deploy only the specific structural tools required to achieve meaning and guarantee social survival.